So what Gary means by in the age of Jetsons, you still got to go Flintstones, is that in the age of all of this technology and the amazing things that we have, like what we're doing now, a podcast, YouTube, we've got LinkedIn, we've got, we've got AI, we've got this just explosion of technology. At the end of the day, the one thing that hasn't changed yet is that we're human being to human being. So where's business going to get done? Business is going to get done, if possible, in person, at the kitchen table, in their office, at a dinner, at coffee, at their daughter's wedding. You got to go back to the way it was. So it's okay to use the technology and get yourself there. Yes, take advantage. I mean, you can't, put your head in the sand. And if you ignore technology, you're dead. I mean, forget it. But you still have to have that human element and that human touch. I think at the end, that's going to make the difference.
Welcome to the Clear Brand Marketing Podcast, where we take the mystery out of marketing and help you get more leads and sales with a clear brand and proven marketing tactics. I'm your host, Alexander.
But I want to start off. You've got a lot of experience on LinkedIn, and so we're going to get into this conversation around people you've rubbed shoulders with. I want to make sure that folks know that we're going to get there. But just as a starting point, I know a lot of our listeners like to hear about marketing, and you've got some really great experience with LinkedIn. So unless you'd rather go somewhere else, let's start there.
No, let's go there because anybody that existed in business world before LinkedIn really appreciates what a gift it is. And when Microsoft bought it, even became more of a gift as it grew. But people don't know how to use it right. And that's that, and I think that's one of the things that's a shame is that there's never really enough good training about it. And LinkedIn is constantly making changes. They're making changes to algorithms. I mean, I was on LinkedIn probably very early on because one of my clients who also worked at LinkedIn, I think was the 13th employee. So I knew about it 24 or 5 years ago and really watched it grow. But what's changed so much over the years is obviously how people put their profiles together and how important it is. But people that just post things in writing, I see people still posting PDFs. I see, people aren't, the world has changed. I mean, the fact that LinkedIn picked up on what Instagram was doing, what TikTok was doing, what everyone else was doing, and created a little video button at the bottom that you can doom scroll or whatever you want to call it is a big deal. And if you're in business, you want to be one of those people and you have to create content. It is, I think, it is the premium content place for people serious about business, whether, again, it was originally put there to recruit, to hire, and that's a whole other side of their business. And I'm sure if you were talking to the folks at LinkedIn, they'd want to talk a lot about it. But I look at it from a marketing standpoint and from a branding standpoint, and the opportunities that if you're doing other things like podcasts, like videos, like, whatever you are putting out there, people get to hear your voice and they get to see you. And that matters so much more than it ever did. I tell this to our financial advisors all the time. Like, it's great that you're a CFP or you're a SEMA. You've got, some 3 letters after your name and Barron's loves you and Forbes loves you. And that's terrific. But there's 300,000 financial advisors out there. And if you want to be referred, how are you going to differentiate yourself? You need to be the answer to the question. So LinkedIn, and even back in the day, it was about SEO and search engine optimization. That's all changed. It's AEO, answer engine optimization. You want to be the answer. I mean, we literally had one of our financial advisors who has a podcast in Texas be an answer when somebody went on ChatGPT and was looking to learn more about selling their business, just to get the basics. And I think he asked the question, is there a podcast that deals with this? And he found this particular gentleman's episode that talked about it. They connected. because he was an answer to the question. And the reason he was an answer, not just because his podcast was on Apple and Spotify and LinkedIn, but he was putting on his website FAQs. So ChatGPT, all of AI is questions and answers. So you need to be the answer to the question. So part of, I think, what people miss out, even with their LinkedIn posts, is asking questions and actually giving answers. So, that whole world has changed. And recently I learned from a woman named Samantha Russell. I have to credit her. She's probably one of the great experts on LinkedIn. You should all follow her. She works for a company called FMG Suite that bought her company. She's more in the financial services industry, but it doesn't matter. She spends a lot of time with LinkedIn and realized that if you're going to put a post on LinkedIn, before you put that post, you need to do at least 5 comments. So the people that you're following, LinkedIn wants to see you commenting. They want to see that engagement. She, I believe, called it, like a battery or a magnet. I'm sorry. So, you have, repel and attract, and they just got to connect each other. So the more comments that are there, first of all, those people that you want to work with, they get to see your name over and over again. And the comment could be, wow, that's exciting, to, oh, that's interesting. I just interviewed somebody, link. I just did a video on link. Here's a chart, whatever it is, here's, would you like to buy my new candy bar link? Whatever it is, you can use that. And that answer engine optimization is where, that's really where that's where the Gretzky quote comes in here. I guess the Ovechkin quote we'd say now, because that's really where the puck is going. So I think it's really important to pay attention to the LinkedIn algorithms, and you got to get in the game. I mean, LinkedIn is not a spectator sport. I hear people, they're voyeurs. Okay, that's terrific. But, it's hand-to-hand combat. And honestly, I think if you're really serious about your business, you're spending a minimum of 90 minutes on LinkedIn a day.
Wow, 90 minutes.
Yep. And I know that sounds tough. If you're a sole practitioner, it's one thing if you have a team and you can have people that do that for you, it's a lot easier. But, and it may be 30 minutes at 10 a.m. and 30 minutes at 1 p.m. and 30 minutes at 9 p.m. Doesn't mean you have to do it consecutively, but you need to see what's going on and not miss out. I mean, I just, again, from somebody who got into a business in his late 20s and was handed a telephone and a phone book and said, go. I mean, to have this kind of opportunity out there with all of these people, and it's not, trust me, you think, oh, successful people aren't there. Oh, they're there. Oh, they're there. There's CEOs, there's CFO, all the C-suite people are there. So many of the people you need to meet, that's the community that you need to go.
So this is, I mean, a super practical and actionable piece of advice already. So you're saying, starting, if you're going to post, you need 5 comments per post, basically, if you want anybody to see that post.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that's a game changer.
Right. And then 82% of those posts will be viewed more effectively if it's a video. Even if you have something great to say, all right. So in our industry, people are putting charts and all graphs. I'm like, no. Go out on the street corner, just grab your iPhone and just, say the 3 main points that are in this report, and then read below. And people, because then that becomes one of those little 60-second, 90-second videos. And when people are passing and they hear, how am I going to handle market volatility? Oh, let me hear what this person had to say. Who is this person? Yeah.
So posting videos. So should I go so far? We're recording a podcast right now. Should I post the podcast to LinkedIn, or should I post, hey, just did this podcast, here's the link, and send them to YouTube?
So I did a combination with Financially Speaking with Mitch Slater, my first podcast, which I did 100 episodes of. I did a combination of audiograms, which for those who don't know what that is, obviously you do. It's little clips from the podcast and you read the words. And again, you have to realize, especially on the phone, not everybody's listening. So that's why the words are
you got to be on there.
You got to be there. So, and now if you're doing something like you're doing it and you have the YouTube clip, well, then you have a video clip that you can use. And so I think it's really critical that, your marketing of what you're doing goes beyond this. So, yes, you're on YouTube Shorts. Yes, you're, on Instagram and obviously, but from LinkedIn standpoint, for the people that you really want to play, that play in your neighborhood, you want them to see this in a variety of different ways. So you can actually, these could be your comments. So you could have a great clip from one of your podcasts, or, keep a whole library of great clips, and you just pop them in and tie it into the comments. So maybe somebody posted, so proud, my daughter graduated from Brown University and is going to study marketing. And you could say, oh, congratulations, that's so great. We talked to one of the greatest marketer in the world. Your daughter might like to view this. Boom.
Okay.
Little things like that.
And so in that comment, that would be a link to like the clip then?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Or the clip itself.
Or the clip itself in the comment.
Yeah. Even better. Yeah.
All right.
Everyone else that is posting on and following that particular person, they get to see that. That I know. In fact, one of the really most active posts that I had really this year came from leaving a comment with that post on somebody that had a very huge following. And what I didn't even realize is that everyone else was going to look at it and think, oh wow, that's really interesting. And so, it like I said, it's not a spectator sport. It is definitely something you got to spend time with, and it's worth it.
So what about when I've got a personal LinkedIn and we've got the business LinkedIn.
Right.
So we've been posting those clips like you're talking about to the Clear Brand LinkedIn page. And I haven't been posting the clips to my personal one because it's like, well, I don't want it to be the exact same as the business, but maybe I should. I mean, what do you think, having these two different profiles, the business and the personal? We just do more clips and I post different clips, or can we post the same clips to both of them?
I'm going to go one better, and because I know he won't care. Okay. Follow a guy named Brian Teege, Tietje. Brian Teege is that guy that was one of maybe the first 20 or 25 people. This guy is an encyclopedia of LinkedIn. He travels all around the world, and that's his main focus, is helping businesses as well as personal and figuring things out. Mm-hmm. Follow him, send him a message. Say, I saw this crazy guy, Mitch Slater, going on and said, I should talk to you. Brian will hit you up. That's the kind of guy he is.
Okay.
And that's what this is. It's like any business. You find actual real people.
Yeah. Okay. So that's super helpful. So let's go to this 90 minutes you mentioned. What are we spending 90 minutes doing? Some of it's commenting, but I can comment 5 comments in less than that. So what are we doing during that 90 minutes?
It's a combination of things. If you're using Sales Navigator, which you should, you're filtering and you're finding your leads. You're building the kind of people that you're building. You're generating the leads. You're sending them if you're allowed in your industry. Mine industry isn't so great with that, but if you're allowed to send people messages, you can do that. So part of it is, actually the Sales Navigator filtering and lead generation and putting that together. Part of it is taking the best posts that you have and putting them in the comments. And then part is really reading what other people are posting and sometimes resharing it. Recently I reshared, I forget who, I think it wasn't Sam Russell, it might have been Nikki Clark, but it was someone who posted 2025 new LinkedIn algorithms. And you can go to my LinkedIn page and you'll find it. And it was a tremendous chart, but it was really, really useful. And it broke it down by industry. It was really, really creative. So again, I found that because that was part of my 90 minutes.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So it is just, part of it is scrolling and learning and then seeing what's
TikTok
out there.
I mean, it's not, you go on, and I'm not on TikTok. I am on TikTok. You can find me in my Springsteen videos. But, most of the videos on TikToks, most of the videos on Instagram, I just like blown away. What I'm seeing, and some of it's interesting and some of it's helpful, but it's not really helpful day to day for me to make a living. So LinkedIn, it is helpful.
Okay. So you're actually learning things on LinkedIn, which is a nice difference.
Correct.
That's great. Yeah. So what else about LinkedIn or how do we use that to maximize our business here? You mentioned kind of doing some outreach with Sales Navigator. Any thoughts on How? Like, what are we sending in these
Your
messages?
profile. I mean, let's start with the beginning. Your profile matters. And here's something else I learned this year. So in your profile, if you bring it up, you have a little thing right under it that describes what you do. What people don't realize is that the first 55 characters of that is what appears when you put in the comments. So you want to make sure that whatever you wrote there is really critical, because if you're putting all these things in the comments, you want to know what you want people to know about. So if the most important thing you want to know is that Clear brand is boom, 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 or I'm a financial storyteller, whatever it is that fits you or fits your business, use those 50 words, 50 characters correctly. And quite frankly, ChatGPT helped me write mine.
Okay.
It really, really came up with some. Obviously, I wasn't the first person to ask it that,
right.
And it had some really great ideas. So, make sure, first of all, you got to have a photo. I still cannot believe, I was speaking to a group of advisors recently, and I mean top advisors of 30 in the room, and I looked up their LinkedIns before, and half the room didn't have a photo. And I said, are you guys in witness protection? Like, what the hell is going on? I mean, you don't exist. If they don't see your photo, you don't exist. You're trying to sell your business, your practice, your expertise. You got to show your face. You may not like it. You may look like the Elephant Man or me or whatever, but you got to show your face. So, get a good photo that describes you best. Don't use an AI photo. Use a real photo of you. That's important. I think in your profile, your education, certainly don't lie, because that you're going to get caught. And you should have a good bio and a good summary. And again, AI can help you with that these days. And LinkedIn has their own, I think, AI mixed right in, of course.
Yeah.
And also the last thing I would say is, you want people work with people that they like, right? People believe in developing relationships. I'll give you an example. So I met a guy named Ted Rubin a few years ago who wrote a book called Return on Relationships. And that blew my mind, because I had always thought throughout my career, whether I was trying to get jobs in radio and TV, when I was standing outside my dorm after Reagan was shot and Leslie Stahl was there, and I went up to her and I developed a relationship because I knew my dorm room was looking exactly opposite GW Hospital where Reagan was, and CBS News would love to be there. And because of that, I developed a relationship that led to an internship for me. All right. So these things throughout my career, I didn't know what I was doing. And that's how I got to work with some other amazing people. But I was developing these relationships. So stop with the ROI and start with the ROR. And again, I always credit Ed Rubin, because he does have that patented, and he's a great guy and you should follow him. But really, the return on the relationships at the end of the day makes a big difference.
So tell me more about that idea. So return on relationship, we're trying to not just meet people, but we want something to happen. Is that kind of what that means?
You want to find the common traits. I mean, that's the beauty of the filters of people that like skiing, people that like snowboarding, people that, went to GW or went to Cornell or wherever, whatever it is in your life. I think people, I'm this way with every person that, we just renovated a kitchen last year. And I had to find the right people. I had to find a designer that, my wife and I could deal with, and a contractor that, I would like. And you could tell, the contractor and I started immediately talking sports. He's a Yankee fan. I'm a Met fan. It was great. It was just a nice rapport. And it doesn't matter what it is. Obviously in business, it's at a much higher level. But I give you an example of a podcast story recently with one of the financial advisors I'm helping. And, he's very, very good with this. And he had someone on who had a very, very large advertising agency who he would love to have as a client, but never had a shot at. But he had him on his show. And the guy got the opportunity to tell his success story, which was an amazing story. How, he literally had this big presentation for Anheuser-Busch. They get off the plane, he drops everything in a puddle. It was outdoors, and he had nothing. And he went to a bar at the airport and wrote as much as he could remember on a cocktail napkin. And whatever they had, they couldn't get to Kinko's, which is, outdating myself a little bit. Anyway, they went into that meeting with Anheuser-Busch. They showed him, the person that brought him into the meeting said to the person who was the decision maker, I just want you to know that these people came in with ideas in a cocktail napkin. Unfortunately, the main guy said, well, let's give him a chance. And he wound up calling him a few hours after the presentation, said that was the single best presentation I've ever heard. Anheuser-Busch would love to work with you. And that's how this particular company out in California got their start. And this is, a relationship story, a success story, a happy story. And he was so happy, this particular guy, to tell the story that now he is working with that particular financial advisor, because his other financial advisor might have done a good job, might have been fine, but didn't really want to hear about him. And most successful business owners, and I'm sure you know this, they like to talk about themselves. And that's okay. That's okay. That's how they got successful. Most of them.
So when you say return on relationships, I'm an introvert. I'm very introverted. Mm-hmm. And so immediately I'm like,
you're doing a podcast and you're doing YouTube. So you're
right. So immediately I'm like, oh boy, I've got to talk to people. But what I'm hearing you say though is it's actually more about listening. And that's something I can do as an introvert. I love listening.
Yeah. Listening to me is the most important skill that there is. In fact, there's a book behind me by a guy named Matt Halloran that just came out called Shut the F Up and Listen. And for me, listening started when I was fortunate enough to work for Larry King as my first job out of college on a national radio show where the guests every night were every person that I could ever want to meet, from Sinatra to Willie Mays to just childhood, to presidents and all kinds of people. But what I observed watching Larry every single night, and those that watched him on CNN too probably saw this, is that he was a really good listener. So he might have an author who wrote this amazing book like James Michener. He would never read the book because he wanted to put himself into the people that are listening right now to that podcast. So they're thinking, my God, why aren't they asking this question? They want to be making sure that you're listening and that you're asking the question. And that curiosity also ties in well. I mean, Larry said to me, I'll never forget it. I'll use my Larry voice. And, he said, Mitch, I never learned anything with my mouth open. And I mean, there's just such truth there. I mean, there's a reason, wow. You hear this, you got 2 ears, 1 mouth, but that's true. And active listening, people want to be seen. I would add that to this. And I know this myself, that even meeting with a doctor recently and watching this doctor who was giving me some important information, not look at me, and was, clearly just being clinical. And I finally said, hey, doc, just whatever bedside manner class there was in medical school, could you turn it on now for 5 minutes and just give me the attention, and I'm not asking you to dumb it down. I'm not an idiot, but, I just want to feel heard. And he was a little offended, but, I felt it was important. And I think that's how most people feel. They want to be heard. They want to be seen.
Absolutely.
But it starts with listening, without a doubt.
So tell me more about this. You mentioned curiosity here too. We talked a little bit before, and curiosity had come up in that conversation as well. What do you find interesting about curiosity?
Well, I mean, I've always, and maybe it's because I wanted to be an actor originally and took improv classes and all kinds of things, and always felt comfortable in a performance mode. And I always liked being someone else, which is the key to most actors, is they prefer to be, their particular character instead of who they are. But when it comes to curiosity, I want to learn more about the person. Like, I really want to learn more about you. I'm not going to ask you the most personal questions in the world, but I'd like to hear about how you got your start. Like, what did it take? Like, if I was interviewing you, I would say, what did it take for you, the introvert, to have the guts to turn on the camera and start with the microphone? I mean, just things that, come up in conversation. Tell me about the first date with your wife. You've been married 35 years. You have this wonderful family. What was it about her on that first date? When I had the opportunity to interview members of my precious Bruce Springsteen and the E Street Band, as a guy who's seen him 300 times, I mean, there were all kinds of questions that I could ask about concerts and this, but I tried to ask the curious things that I really wanted to know. So when I talked to Steve Van Zandt, who also played Silvio in The Sopranos, and I've gotten to know him very well, what a terrific guy. I mean, the first thing I said to him was like, what did it feel like to be doing television? You had never done that before. I mean, you were always, the number 2 guy with the Bruce's band. And he explained to me this great story is like, well, you figured it out, man, because they wanted me to play Tony Soprano. And I'm like, no, I'm not. That's not me. I'm the number 2 guy. I'm the consigliere. I'm on Bruce's side, So, I gave them the name of Jimmy Gandolfini. I said, that's who you want for The Sopranos. And Stevie, by asking these questions, it also animates people. I mean, You can see I'm animated just talking about these things. And I love that. And I love when people get animated and they're happy and you can see what they're passionate about. Because at the end of the day, and I learned this from my brother, who's a phenomenal marketer, sold an amazing business and has just had an incredible career and truly a mentor to me, is that you really, it are these little moments that matter, and you have to put as much time in those moments, that comes from being curious, that comes from listening, and all of the above.
So what do you mean? Tell me more about these moments that matter. What do you mean by that?
So I think every single day moments matter. I'll share something now. I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but I haven't told many people, so I would probably say, please don't put this out till for at least another few weeks.
Okay.
I'm having open heart surgery in June. Okay, this came out of nowhere. I'm going to be fine. I mean, it's a genetic thing I was born with. I didn't know. Thank God, I go to a doctor every year. They heard the little murmur. They sent me to the cardiologist. They said, you have aortic stenosis. When it gets to this point, we do surgery. It's treatable. It's the paper cut of surgery. I'm like, yeah, you do it if it's the paper cut of surgery. But that moment was holy shit, man. I mean, that was just such a slap in the face, like legacy. What's been my life? What have I accomplished? What matters to me the most? Even though I know, intellectually, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to have a really crappy 4 to 6 weeks while I'm recovering, but I will be fine. But that moment was unexpected. I did not see that moment coming. I had never had anything medically wrong with me other than minor stuff. Even though I had a dad that had a lot of heart issues, it was totally separate what he had. I don't have those issues. And this is something that luckily in 2055 is easy to take care of. Thank God it's not 1955 or 1855.
Yeah.
But moments surprise you. I remember the moment that my kids, I remember the moment when my son, was in high school and all of a sudden just went from like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm just sort of like trying to find himself in the world to realizing, you know what? I know that I'm going to need to work hard to be successful. And I want to get into a decent college. And something triggered in his brain. It wasn't his parents, because we were not helicopter parents at all. And it changed him. And then, suddenly he goes to a great college. He starts out with one career, moves to another career, passes the hardest test in our industry, finishing up his MBA and starting, at one of the top firms in a couple of weeks. And that's a moment that, was unexpected. And, to be fair, because I have 2 kids, my daughter, when she just decided, because her mother's a journalist and has been with Time Magazine for many years, and just woke up one day, I want to do this. But I don't really care about the news. I care about what's happening in the entertainment world. I want to work at People Magazine. And she's now the senior editor I probably gave her a wrong title, but she's doing something big in parenting in People Magazine, and she's interviewing all kinds of people. And the moment, that she said that, I was like, and we all say things. And then there's moments that are in meetings. And I think that's really important. I want to mention a woman named Claude Silver who works, and may talk about Gary Vaynerchuk in a minute, but she works for Gary Vaynerchuk. She's the chief heart officer, which is their version of HR, but she really helps all the employees. And there was a moment when I interviewed her in her office, and she turned to me and she said, Mitch, who's the most important person in the room? And this was in the middle of the podcast. She asked me the question and I didn't have a clue. And when she answered it and said to me, the most important person in the room is the room, because the room is always listening. Everybody else is talking. Everybody else is trying to make their point. So if you want to be the most important person in the room, be a good listener. All right. That was like a holy, another one of those moments. And, I think we all have them throughout our lives. Some are good, some are really bad. Some are shocking, some are fun. But this is our one shot, right? This is our time on Earth. And I guess the older you get, the more all of this begins to matter. My 30-year-old self would not have been saying half of these things or thinking about these things, because at that point I was like, how the hell am I going to afford a house? How am I going to have a family? How am I, I spent 10 years messing around in radio and TV and acting and not making any money, having a lot of fun and incredible life experiences that I'm so grateful for, but I couldn't see that at the time. Mm-hmm. So, but these moments from time to time, and my brother actually writes a blog called Moments Later, which is a play on his name and my name, Slater. And he talks a lot about that. I would definitely recommend people check out Jeff Slater's Moments Later blog, which has been a very, very successful marketing blog for a number of years.
So tell me, clearly you've gotten a good return on your relationships and found these moments that matter and leaned into those. I'm curious to hear, you've met a lot of high performers. What has stood out to you about how these people function, how they get to that level, how they, what allows them to achieve what they do?
That's a great question. Listen, they're all human. They all put their pants on one leg at a time. All right. They're from the biggest, athletes and entertainers and movie stars and everybody I've met, with some exceptions, they're mostly just normal people. But as far as in the business world, the most successful people that I've met, they're driven. They are so driven, and they're driven. They have focus. And the last thing that I would mention is they've usually had one or two failures. The most successful people, I think, in the world, in the history of the world, in the history of the business world, are people that have failed. It's very, very rare that you come out of the box I guess maybe Amazon's an example, although, it wasn't such a success early on. He was sitting there with his wife boxing up books for, 5 or 6 years. But there are people that literally lost everything. And that amazes me, is that they have, I don't know where it comes from, whether it's in their genes or it's just the way that they're built, but they have the ability to, pick themselves up, dust themselves off and start again and learn from their experiences. And that's hard. That's really hard. But, if we don't learn from our mistakes, then what's the point of life? You got to learn from the mistakes. And we do tend to make the same mistakes over and over again. That's certainly a common trait. But I think in business, the most successful people that I've known, they're driven, they're humble. They may not come across as humble to other people, but when you get to know them personally, they're actually very humble. They're very grateful. They're very appreciative. And at least for me, the most successful people that I've met are really nice people. They're really, really nice people, which bothers me when people are successful and they're not nice, because I don't understand that. understand people that are so self-absorbed and so obsessed with themselves, and everything is about themselves. And I don't understand how anybody like that could be successful, without getting political. But I just, that doesn't make sense to me, because,
Mhm.
how do you get people to like you if you're not likable? Someone once talked about likability being like the most important skill that you can't really teach, but likability is why people work together. And the other thing I'll add, and this goes way back to my training days at Merrill Lynch in the late 80s when I first started. I was in a training class. A guy wrote on a chalkboard the letters IASM, and he kind of did a mic drop, walked out of the room, said, "That's the key to success. Thank you very much." And he came back and he finished the word ENTHU, and it was enthusiasm. And then under IASM wrote, "I am sold myself." And then we had a long conversation about it. And boy, did that mean a lot to me. It meant that, number one, you've got to be enthusiastic, even during the dark days. And especially if you're in business and you're working with people and they're depending on you for service, that you want to hear that. You want to hear that enthusiasm. And I am sold myself doesn't mean you're sold on this product or this whatever it is. It's you're sold on your belief system. You're sold on doing the right thing for the people you're working with, and those things come across. And I'm glad that I heard that early on in my career as a financial advisor, because it's really, really critical. And people tend to flock to people that also are like them in different ways. So the other side of the coin is, you kind of have to be a chameleon too. So, I learned that if I was in the room with I hate the expression, the little old lady, which, is probably the same age as me right now. I can't be talking a mile a minute and doing my shtick. I need to slow down. I need to enunciate. I need to listen. Doesn't mean I have to become a little old lady, but I at least have to act in a way that they can relate to. And these are, again, these are on the job skills. And there is nothing better than anything. I mean, there's every great business school in the world is terrific. Every great business book in the world is terrific, but nothing works better than on the job training.
So one thing I'm curious about here is you mentioned failure, you mentioned the dark days. I want to hear more about that, but let's start with, do you think, from the folks that you've had the joy of interacting with, do you think that these hard times and these failures make them who they are? They kind of become this person through the difficulty, or do you think it kind of just reveals this kind of relentlessness, this unstoppable side of them that was already there, and now they just push through, and they're the ones that kept going through the failure when others might have stopped?
I think it's a really great question. I think it's just there. I think it probably is just there. I mean, I think the being humbled and failing or losing money or whatever it is changes people, definitely. But I do think that innately, that's why childhood is so important. Things that happen in your childhood. I am far from a psychologist. I wish I was, because that would have helped me a lot more throughout my career and in difficult times. But the more that I've learned about it and the more that I've read about it, I just think that the psychology of what you dealt with as when you were younger, if you were independent. And I mean, this sound like the old, okay, boomer guy. But, I grew up in a generation. I came home from school. I threw down my books because there was no backpack. I got on my Schwinn bike at 3:30, and I biked to where my friends were, and we played football. We put whatever we did, and we knew around 6:00 we needed to get home, and that was it. We were independent. We weren't worried about being snatched. We weren't worried about anything bad happening, and quite frankly, my parents weren't either. My dad was working. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, and she was busy doing the things she was doing. And there was never there was such trust in you and such confidence. Whereas Mike, and again, this was very hard as a parent, and we tried our best to not be the helicopter parents, but many are. And I think that relates a lot to people as they get older and the confidence that they may have in themselves and in their business is because they're always, they know that mom and dad are going to take care of it. They're going to do their laundry. They're going to do all of these things. And that's not at all today's world. And so I do think your upbringing, where you were brought up, all of those things are important. All right. But at the end of the day, I do think people can change and people can learn and they can realize that, yeah, maybe I didn't handle that right. Maybe that was a big mistake. And those are the people I respect the most, that have the humility to say, I was wrong. And we mentioned Gary Vaynerchuk. I'm going to give you a great example about Gary V. I'm sure most of your people know him. And if you haven't, just follow Gary V. An amazing story, written incredible books about making it out of nothing. But, Gary, I did an event with Gary, speaking of, this ties it back to LinkedIn, back in 2014, where it was a joint event between my company, Gary, and LinkedIn. And the moderator was from LinkedIn. Actually, it was Dan Swift, who you mentioned earlier, and myself. And somebody in the crowd, and this was with quite a crowd, said to Gary, the one thing you're not talking about on social media is LinkedIn. And he turned around to the guys at LinkedIn and he says, listen, with all due respect, I don't believe in it. I don't think it's going to work. It just doesn't fit. I don't see how it fits in for marketers, for advertisers. He was dead wrong. About 3 years later, maybe after the Microsoft purchase, I remember Gary put out a post and he said, I publicly have said this and I want to let people know that I'm wrong. I was wrong, and I was wrong big time. Yes, I might have been right about Snapchat or whatever, but I was wrong on this one. And you can be wrong, but if you don't realize it and teach people that you've learned from this, and then suddenly Gary became, huge on LinkedIn and he realized the power of it. So, even the great ones and unfortunately we don't see this a lot with any political leaders today, which is a shame. But in the business world, I admire people that are willing to admit when they're wrong. I do. And I've been wrong a lot more than I've been right throughout my life. And I, just try to learn as best as I can from those experiences.
I think a lot of us are wrong a lot more than we're right. And the wisdom is in realizing that. But on this conversation of difficulty, we've got a lot happening right now. It's kind of interesting where I've been observing, I get to interact with a lot of business owners as part of my job. And business owners I'm talking to, and then also, kind of 2-3 layers out where they're telling me that they're talking to folks. There's a lot of difficulty going on now for one reason or another. A lot of volatility. What do you think it takes to make it through and potentially make it through better than you started in a difficult time?
Well, I think it starts with honesty. And I think no matter what business you're in, whether you're in the financial services business or you're in the widget business, doesn't matter what it is, you need to be honest with your customers. And you need to, not hide from the reality of uncertainty. And also you have to have perspective. So you're able to go back. And I was talking to someone earlier today about they should really have in case of emergency, break glass, and they should have a video that's ready to send to all of your clients, for example, right now, letting them know this is not the first time that we've seen volatility, that we've talked to you before in the past about what matters to you, and that's why we have liquidity or whatever it is in your business. This is just using the parallel to my industry. But I think by being honest about it, and I would use today's technology. Like if I was the CEO of, any company that's going to be affected by what's happening right now, specifically with products, could be eggs or whatever it is, be open with people. because they'll come back to you and they'll wonder why. And if there's, I don't know, I'm just going to use, McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's as an example, so if you have these three big burger chains, so to speak, and, one is out in front and really telling people, and I'm not, maybe, I don't know if I would do this, but I might have Ronald McDonald buy time on television, and maybe it's not a good idea in the clown suit, but, and talk about it and say, yeah, I feel so bad that our dollar meal has to be $1.25, but this is why we have to help our farmers, whatever it is. And COVID, I think, was the greatest example in our lifetime of how that could be handled right and how that could be handled wrong. And now that we're looking back and we're like, oh boy, we should have done it that way or that way. But we didn't know we were thrown in the midst of all this. But those that got in front of it, those are the brands that I think people will go back to and feel good about. And, if I'm a brand, if I have a small business and I'm, a plumber in a town and I've got a big plumbing company or whatever, and, I just have to raise prices for my visits and for my contracts. Don't just do it, explain why. And I do think most people will understand, because I don't know if they read newspapers, but they're finding their news somewhere, and they know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And, we saw that. And again, COVID, I think, was such a great, if, I'm sure at Wharton and every great business school, they'll study the things that were done really, really well and the things that were really done wrong. And hopefully you learn from the mistakes. The problem is history has this just horrible thing of repeating itself over and over, which is always the biggest shock to me. But not everybody reads history books, and I'm a junkie on, FDR and Churchill and all this stuff, and love to learn about what these great people have done. So, but yeah, I think being honest is probably that's the best way.
That's the starting point.
Yeah, you know what? You can't fool people. They're people are a lot smarter than they're given credit for, no matter where they live in the country, or what the societal, whether they're, middle class. It doesn't matter. They're smarter than you think. Don't treat them like they're idiots.
Yeah. Any thoughts on? That it's great for business. Any thoughts on the mentality to get through, for the business owner who's seeing these difficult times? Maybe clients are leaving, or they're not buying. That we work with home builders, and home builders right now are seeing a lot of folks stop conversations about projects because they want to wait and see what happens with interest rates. Mm-hmm. That's mentally very difficult. Any thoughts on the mentality to make it through?
Again, but part of it's history. Part of it is going back. This is not the first time that's happened. All right. Yeah. We've been through so many different cycles, and in real estate goes through lots of different cycles. So I think you talk to the people that were around during the last cycle. If you weren't, don't try to figure it out on your own. Mm-hmm. Try to speak to those that can give you wisdom of how they got through it and what their experience was. It's probably always good to have, that's kind of why you always have to have a reserve fund. No matter what you do in life or any kind of business, you should always have, a year's worth of income or whatever it is, put aside. An emergency fund I can't say enough about how important that is. And just look at this, just look recently, we've got COVID, we've got this, we've got, there's always something. And the best way is to be prepared, but there's no easy answer. There's probably some great books written on this. There's probably some great videos. I've been amazed on some of the videos that I've seen out there. You have to kind of get through some of the junk, but there's some really, really great advice out there through podcasts or through videos that people are, have that information to give you. I guess the number one thing is don't panic. And, but you also have to be realistic. I'm also, if you do unfortunately have a situation where you don't see it getting better. I do believe there are times you do cut your losses, but you've got to do a lot of homework before you get to that point.
Yeah. Well, and I love what you're saying about looking back, and this kind of stuff's happened before. There's a lot of folks, especially on social media, who are predicting things, saying, here's what I would do, without the experience of having been there, and I think so. Looking back at what happened, there's a guy named Ray Dalio who based his entire, he started they managed multiple billions of dollars of people's investments, and he lost everything in the early 80s when the stock market crashed then. And that was exactly what he said. There's got to be a way to look back at history and figure out a time that's similar to now, and I can figure out what to invest in for myself and my clients. And so he did. And that's his whole approach, is it's all cyclical, And you mentioned history. I just started going through the biographies of presidents. So I'm in George Washington's biography right now. And it's on the hard days. It's interesting to, jump in the car at the end of the day, throw the audiobook on. And it's like, man, that was harder. The stuff that he went through.
I listen. Walter Isaacson wrote Jefferson. I forget who wrote the Washington one, but those biographies, of LBJ. I mean, just certain presidents specifically. I was a presidential junkie as a kid. I loved to read stuff about that, but even more now in understanding and especially seeing where they came from. And I mean, like I was just listening to, I think it's called History Hits, or I don't know, it's a podcast about history, and they were doing something on LBJ, and they started talking about how this is the last guy in the world that you would have ever thought that would have led, to the greatest civil rights legislature of all time. I mean, if you knew this guy growing up in South Texas and what he had to do to kind of get off of his farm and what his father was like and what he did politically early on in his career, to what he learned from being in the Senate and dealing with some of the kind of the worst people in the world, from that perspective, to realizing he needed to right his wrong. And, obviously he's remembered for Vietnam and a lot of other really horrible things. But he was so right on these things. So people can change. And that's I think what's so great about history is, like, you can realize how people can change. And that gives me hope and faith in our society. Yeah.
So one of the things you mentioned before we got recording here, you said, in the age of the Jetsons, you need to be the Flintstones. Can you tell me about this? What does it mean?
Sure. Well, Gary Vaynerchuk quote. This is my favorite of all of them. So in the age, for those that, are younger, in the 1960s, there were the two most favorite cartoons, so to speak, were the Jetsons and the Flintstones. The Jetsons were about this space-age family, and they flew around in cars, which I really still can't believe. As a kid, I really thought in 1965, when it would be 2025, I'd be looking outside and seeing cars flying. And they had a robot, and honestly, they literally had something that looked like an iPhone. And some of this stuff is amazing. So that was all about technology in the future. The Flintstones went the other direction. That was, let's look, created this family in bedrock in the caveman days. All right. So what Gary means by, in the age of Jetsons, you still got to go Flintstones, is that in the age of all of this technology and the amazing things that we have, like what we're doing now, a podcast, YouTube, we've got LinkedIn, we've got, we've got AI, we've got this just explosion of technology. At the end of the day, the one thing that hasn't changed yet is that we're human being to human being. So where's business going to get done? Business is going to get done, if possible, in person. I'm not saying it can't be done, via Zoom, because it can. We proved that through COVID. But in person, at the kitchen table, in their office, at a dinner, at coffee, at their daughter's wedding. It's just, and the Flintstone reference is really like, you got to go back to the way it was. So it's okay to use the technology and get yourself there. But at the end of the day, and I know from Gary's experience, the best business that he's closed from everything he's done, from starting the reservation business, Resi, to selling to American Express, to the success of his VaynerMedia, of his social media agency, all of those big clients, they were all landed in person. They were all done in person, and they were, might have been sitting at a Met game or a Cub game or a Dodger game or whatever it was that they were into. But, you gotta, it's really just about being human and, yes, take advantage. I mean, you can't, put your head in the sand. And if you ignore technology, you're dead. I mean, forget it. But you still have to have that human element and that human touch. I think at the end, that's going to make the difference. Yeah,
I've started to see, there's these AI can write your social media posts, and you can have AI that'll jump in and automatically comment and reply. And it seems like we're heading towards this, this world of that possibility, AI writing an email, and then the person reads it and has AI respond to the email. And I think you can tell. I think that, there's little tells that kind of give it away. And it's like, man, I do want to be talking to a human. It's going to make the folks whose customer service is a human answering the phone be that much more valuable if that sticks around for much longer. But I'd much rather work with a bank or something where I can call and it's a human than I've got to go through bots for 10 minutes.
Oh, and I, this is interesting. Yesterday I had a call, or the other day, American Express, and not bragging, but I have a platinum card. Okay. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things about paying for a platinum card is this extra level of service, and that I always got. And I called, and it was a minor thing that I just needed fixed, a really minor thing. I spent a half an hour trying to get a representative. 9, put in the number, put in the. I finally got the representative, and I said to her, and first thing she said, well, thank you for being a platinum card member for 43 years or whatever. And I said, I'm not going to yell at you because I'm sure this is not your fault, but I can't be the first person to say that this is unacceptable. Mm-hmm. I mean, this took me 30 minutes. That's 30 minutes out of my day. My time is valuable, as is your time. And she said, I'm going to be 100% honest. I know this call is being recorded and people will hear me, but I don't know what they're doing. I think it's a mistake. They are a big believer in this technology. And I said, well, honestly, they're going to lose people because there's going to be another bank that is not going to go that way. And people, I'm not saying I'm any better than anybody, but if that's the service you promised, that's the service you have to deliver. And we all know, the agony of, screaming. They were watching me. I was at work and everyone was like looking at me. I'm going, representative. I'm like out of my mind, and everyone's laughing because they've all been through it. And I'm like, this is my platinum card. This is like, I'm not calling, the public service, electric and gas, Mm-hmm. Anyway, that's like I said, a first world problem, but it's an example of bad service.
Right.
And the world is too competitive right now. And you better provide good service because people have choices and they will make those choices.
How much cash back, would a person trade to be able to call and talk to a human?
Exactly.
That's this question as we move forward.
Yeah.
Being a human, engaging in those relationships, getting, return on, you have to actually engage in the relationship to have a return on it.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, and your point, I think your point is really true. And you have to really, value the human interaction side of all of it at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Anything we missed? Anything? Of course, I'd love for folks to know how they can interact with you, how they can build a relationship and potentially do business with you.
Yeah, I'm about as an open book as you can get.
Right.
Certainly hit me up on LinkedIn. That's the best place. Has my email, has all my contact information there. I would love people to take a listen to some of the interviews I did on financial. You can find it on Apple and Spotify, Financially Speaking with Mitch Slater. Some great episodes. John Taffer from Bar Rescue. It was phenomenal. And obviously some of the musicians and artists, as well as some of the CEOs. And obviously on my YouTube page, I have a lot of video. And if you happen to be a Bruce Springsteen fan, you probably already know me because I'm the annoying guy in the pit that seems to get all the really good videos for all the shows. But, I love talking about music, and anybody that wants to reach out, ask me anything. I love mentoring young people, helping them, giving them suggestions if they, are looking for work, and connecting people. I mean, probably my favorite thing in the world to be doing is networking and connecting people. And the older I get too, the more of a thrill I get, because we've all had people that have helped us. And that's really, talk about, paying it forward. That is the ultimate thing that you can do. So please feel free to reach out to me and keep listening to this podcast. It's a really good one. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Me too. We'll have the link for your LinkedIn and your podcast in the show notes to make it really easy for folks. So thanks for being here, Mitch. This has been great.
My pleasure. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the Clear Brand Marketing Podcast. If you need help with your website or marketing, go to clearbrand.com. You can schedule a free strategy call with one of our consultants, or take advantage of our free resources to help you write, design, or implement a better website and marketing.